In this demonstration, we will learn how to create a vCenter Cloud Provider resource. The vCenter Cloud Provider resource contains the connection details and settings of the vCenter server and is used by CloudShell Apps to deploy VMs on vCenter. It also provides commands on the app that allow the end user to manage the VM's lifecycle from the sandbox. For example, power on, refresh IP, save and restore snapshots, and power off. For illustration purposes, we will use vSphere Client 5.5. The vCenter settings we will need are all listed in vSphere Client's inventory dashboards. To create a vCenter Cloud Provider resource, log into CloudShell Portal as administrator in the global domain. Note that you can also create the Cloud Provider resource in a different domain, but deploying apps in a non-global domain requires additional configurations. For details, see the online help article on managing private cloud apps and domains, open the inventory dashboard, and click Add New. Select the VMware vCenter shell. Give the resource a name. Set the vCenter server's IP address, and click Create. The resource is created. Next, let's set the vCenter server settings. Set the user credentials on the vCenter server, including corporate domain. Make sure the user has the required permissions. For details, see the online help article on vCenter user permissions. Specify the data center to be used by CloudShell. The data center is displayed at the top of the tree in all inventory dashboards. Note that a single vCenter Cloud Provider resource can only work with one data center, so make sure all the vCenter objects you specify are associated with this data center. When you specify the objects in the following fields, provide paths that are relative to the data center. In VM storage, specify the vCenter storage in which the VMs will be created. The storage can be a data store or a data store cluster. In vSphere Client, these are listed in the Data Stores and Data Store Clusters dashboard. Since our data store is located under a cluster, we will also include the cluster name in the field. The next two fields are relevant for CloudShell deployments that use the Sandbox Save and Restore paid add-on. Saved Sandbox Storage allows you to specify a different storage on which to save the VM's clone, which will be used to create the VM when restoring the saved sandbox. By default, CloudShell uses the Data Store or Data Store Cluster defined in the VM storage field above. And behavior during save controls the VM state while the sandbox is being saved. In holding network, specify a default network to be used for the VM's vNICs when disconnecting them from another network. The network must be under the DV switch you will use, as displayed in vSphere Client's networking dashboard. Do not include the DV switch in the value. Note that a distributed port group can also be specified. In VM location, specify an existing folder in the defined storage where the VM will be created. By default, the folder name is Quali Systems, so make sure to add this folder if you want to use it. In vSphere Client, the VM folders are listed in the VMs and Templates dashboard. If you wish to manage VM connectivity to other VMs or resources from CloudShell, specify the DV switch to be used. Let's return to vSphere's networking dashboard. make sure it's the holding network's DV switch. CloudShell will also need to create port groups in the DV switch, so make sure you have an appropriate VMware license. In the VM cluster field, specify the ESXi host or host cluster to use when deploying the VM. In vSphere Client, these are listed in the Hosts and Clusters dashboard. If you specified a cluster in the VM cluster field, specify a resource pool under this particular cluster. Set the shutdown method to use when powering off the VM. Options are hard and soft. Hard powers off the VM without shutting down any running applications, while soft shuts down any running applications before powering off the VM. The following fields are optional. The Execution Server Selector field is not in the scope of this demo. This attribute allows you to associate a specific execution server with the deployment process, and is typically used in CloudShell deployments spread across different geographical locations to link the deployment to the execution server that is physically closest to the vCenter server. If you plan on deploying your app from an OVF image, the execution server will need to use the OVF tool when deploying apps. Specify the path to the OVF tool installed on your execution server machines or in a location that is accessible to the execution servers. Use reserved networks to avoid using specific vNICs for VM connectivity. vNICs configured to these networks will not be used. Use semicolons to specify multiple networks. Promiscuous mode determines whether the port groups on the virtual switch allow all incoming traffic. Set to false to disable this mode. Click Continue to validate the settings. When validation completes, an indication message is displayed. The resource can now be used for app deployments. This concludes our demonstration on how to create a vCenter Cloud Provider resource. For more information, visit our help site at help.quali.com.